Good morning, and welcome to this worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Idaho Falls. My name is Cindy Miller, and I'm your worship associate for today. Whether you are a longtime member, or if this is your first visit here, we welcome you as you are. Unitarian Universalism is a liberal religion with Jewish Christian roots. It has no creed, but rather it affirms the worth of human beings, advocates freedom of belief, and the search for truth and meaning. We welcome you to this virtual and holy space. Please know that you are welcome here. Today's service is led from the church sanctuary by Reverend Kevin Carson. We'll enjoy Jessica's beautiful music, Elizabeth's time for all ages, and we thank Drew, our tech person, for running the technology that makes this all possible. We have many announcements for today. The full text and details of them are found in your weekly update email that was sent on April 28th. So here's the first one. As you are able, please sign into the chat box, likely on the right side of your screen, or if you're using a smartphone, it might be below the window. This will let us know who's joining us. If you have joys, concerns, or sorrows that have affected your lives in the recent past, and you would like to share with the congregation, please post them to the chat box on the right of your screen. If you are joining us for our live Sunday service for the first or second time and would like to get our email newsletter, please call the church administrative office and leave a message. We're very glad you're joining us. Okay. There will be an online fundraiser auction. Participants will log in and bid on items. If you have items, experiences, or material objects that you are willing to donate, please contact Cindy Logan at spudnut@email.com. If you want to help with the fundraiser, please contact the board at idahofallsuu.com. The UUCIF Women's Group meeting will meet on May 7th at 5:30 p.m. at Cape Curley Park, close to the corner of Emerson and 9th. Social distancing will be practiced. Volunteers are needed for several programs. The first is the Summer Food Program volunteers. UUCIF members are being recruited to prepare and serve lunches this summer in either Cape Curley Park or Highland Park. You can volunteer to be a team lead or a team member. The team lead will attend a training and be present for an entire work. Team members will assist at variable times throughout the week. And for more information, if you would like to participate, contact Elizabeth at dree@idahofallsuu.org or leave a message at 208-522-5752. The second need for volunteers comes from Idahoans for a Fair Wage. They would like to identify people in our congregation and community willing to help. We need assistance in the following areas: to share contact information to keep supporters informed, volunteers to collect signatures within the church and community at large, identifying people who you know are living with low wages that are willing to share their stories, identify businesses you are aware of that are paying significantly higher than the $7.25 per hour minimum wage to allow us to promote the businesses. Financial contributions are also needed to fund their work. Finally, you can go to https://www.fairwageid.org to sign up for the newsletter. Third need for volunteers: save the date, Saturday, May 22nd from 1 to 3 p.m. We'll chalk up parking spaces at UUCIF. Park across the street in the post office parking lot, and we'll fill the parking spaces with chalk. Giant bubble bucket stations with a giant bubble wand will be available too. Knee pads and chairs for adults are provided. Masks and social distancing are also required. And then a word from our board. The UUCIF board reminds you that we are still having virtual worship services every Sunday. A task force has been convened and will meet regularly by Zoom to make a plan for reopening the building for services. You will receive updates from the task force as their work progresses. Okay. Congratulations are in order. The UUA Lifespan Faith Engagement Office just notified us that Elizabeth has received Renaissance recognition for achieving 75 hours of Renaissance training. We would like to congratulate Elizabeth for this achievement and thank her for her commitment to the continuing education in religious education and leadership. The Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly for 2021. General Assembly is time to circle round in community. We circle round in care and healing, for liberation and justice, and for love and courage. We share stories of the work happening at our association and in our congregations. We study ways to implement and live into our mission. UUA GA 2021 will incorporate recommendations from the Commission on Institution Change Report, Widening the Circle of Concern, and dialogue with the Article 2 Commission about our principles and purposes. Through programs and workshops, professional and lay leaders will learn and develop skills to equip them with tools to continue the mission in our faith. Featured speakers will delve into theological analyses, work around organizing for liberation, and the ways that we tend our spiritual resilience. Honoring the myriad of communities within Unitarian Universalism, there will be more time for networking, meetups, and caucusing over the span of 5 days together. Finally, during GA 2021, we will preserve our connection to Milwaukee and the Mid-American region through special programming and activities, so get ready to circle around. And I think that's it. Nope. The care team reminds you that they are there for you. If you need a ride to a doctor's appointment, is your family suffering from the flu or other malady and would appreciate a meal that you don't have to prepare? Would you appreciate a friendly social call so you don't feel so alone? The UUCIF care team is here to help. If you need a hand or know a member or friend who does, please contact one of the care team. The information for contacting is in the update email that you received on April 28th. And our last announcement, adapted from the words of John Saxon. A religious community is like a river formed from the many streams of our lives that meet and merge and flow to the sea. As members and friends of this religious community, we share our time and energy, our creativity and imagination, our visions, our talents, our skills, gifts, and the streams of our individual lives to create a river that is both deep and broad. A river that is made of many streams, sustains life, and refreshes the land through which it flows. But the river of this community also depends on our shared financial support that makes real our shared values and vision. You are invited to give generously and joyously as you are willing and as you are able. You can make your contribution by mailing a check to the church at Post Office Box 50376 in Idaho Falls, Idaho, or by clicking on the donate button in the upper right corner of the church's website. Please help me ring in today's service by becoming present to this space and this time, no matter where you are. I will ring our peace bowl 3 times, and as I do so, please breathe deeply. For as long as you can hear it sound, I invite you to slowly breathe in the sense of community that emerges from our time together, and breathe out your feelings of loneliness and separation. The peace you will feel will bring you into this shared sacred gathering, no matter where you are physically located. We will begin our service with our prelude. Our church covenant was decided upon by our members, and it, along with our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles, is our guide to how we relate to the world and to each other. Even though we cannot be together physically and cannot recite this as one, please feel free to read along with me from your order of service as I read the covenant here. Love is the spirit of the community and the service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. I will read these words by Starhawk, number 36 in the book Lifting Our Voices, as Reverend Kevin lights our chalice. We are all longing to go home to some place where we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned. We can only catch glimpses of it from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins your strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends, someplace where we can be free.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning is the poem Why I Wake Early by Mary Oliver. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories, and into the windows of even the miserable and crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star that just happens to be where you are in the universe, to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness and kindness. I invite you now to join in our opening hymn, number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross the Store.
May nothing evil cross this door, and may your fortune never pry about these windows. May the roar and rain go by. By faith made strong, the rafters will withstand the battering of the storm. This hearth, though all the world grow chill, will keep you warm. Peace shall walk softly through these rooms, touching our lips with holy wine, till every casual corner blooms into a shrine. With laughter drown the raucous shout, and though these sheltering walls are thin, may they be strong to keep hate out and hold love in.
Today's Time for All Ages is The Treehouse Rules from Love Connects Us. The treehouse was built on the congregation's grounds over 3 Saturdays in September, using donated lumber and the donated labor of the families who attended the church and other adults who wanted to help with the project. Even the kids got involved, especially those aged 10 and up, by pitching in and helping in any way that they could during the construction. And it was a fantastic place to be once it was completed, with a window that faced the nearby playground, a rope ladder to climb up, and a slide to exit. While everyone was happy that the treehouse was there after all the planning and construction, it soon became a problem. When too many kids wanted to enjoy it at once, their different ideas about how to use it came into conflict with each other. The younger kids got a thrill out of running races through it, hurriedly climbing up the rope ladder, rushing through the treehouse to slide down one after the other, over and over again. But the older kids wanted to hang out in the treehouse after the worship service ended, playing games like cards and jacks. One day, a second grader racing by interrupted the fifth grader's game of cards for the third time. That was it. A fight broke out, with name-calling, pushing, and some tears. Some adults demanded that the treehouse be off limits until the children learned to cooperate with each other. Other adults protested that their children had special rights to use the treehouse because they had helped to build it. The Religious Education Committee had meetings about policy for the use of the treehouse. They were getting ready to report to the congregation's board of directors with their findings. Meanwhile, the minister considered bringing in a consultant from the district to address the conflict, which had now spread throughout the entire congregation. But while the adults were arguing, holding meetings, and creating policies, something happened. The children who had been temporarily banned from the treehouse started talking to each other and looking for ways they could all use the playhouse together. A few of them remembered the covenants they had created in their RE programs the year before.
Idea.
They suggested a covenant could be created for how the kids could use the treehouse. So they sat down and talked about why they liked the treehouse and what made it fun. They discovered ways they could all enjoy their treehouse in the way they wanted to. They came up with a covenant which laid out how they would be in the treehouse and how they would respect others who were also using the space. Just as the adults were starting a congregational meeting to adopt a policy for the use of the treehouse, some church leaders looked out the window. They saw the children cooperating with each other and using the treehouse without conflict. A teenager was dispatched to the treehouse to discover what rules the participants had come up with, and when she reported back to the adults of the congregational meeting, the announcement came that the participants had created a covenant with one another. The adults were humbled. Some sheepishly glanced at their church covenant framed on the wall, hanging there and mostly forgotten. The congregational meeting was adjourned. The adults went on their way, reminded of the power of covenants, working together to find a solution, and the commitment of people in right relationship with one another, all because of the treehouse rules. The end.
For years, the sharing of joys, concerns, and sorrows has been an enduring ritual. It is a time in our congregation where each of us has the opportunity to share major events in our lives so we can all be uplifted by this Unitarian Universalist community. As Drew or I reads the joys, concerns, or sorrows that were emailed to us or put in our chat box, Reverend Kevin will light a candle. And the first one is a joy from Reverend Kevin and Marty, that their dog Holly is recovering well from her recent surgery. That's all. Do you have more?
Yeah, we have a few in the chat. One is a joy from Victoria McDonald. Spring might have arrived. After a week of heavy rain, we'll get sun for one day. The Pacific wrens are singing lustily on her property. Then we have another joy from Roby Cartmel, and that is the tulips are out and the flowers are blooming. And that's it for the joys and concerns in the chat.
Reverend Kevin will light an additional candle for all those joys, concerns, and sorrows that we hold in our hearts and are not able to share today. Stay healthy and strong, members and friends. Our UU community lifts up its love for each and every one of you.
Our reading this morning is from an op-ed piece which appeared on the CNN website on September 29, 2012 by Alan Miller called "My Take, I'm Spiritual but Not Religious is a Cop-Out." The increasingly common refrain that I'm spiritual but not religious represents some of the most retrogressive aspects of contemporary society. The spiritual but not religious movement, an inappropriate term, as that would suggest some collective organizational aspect, highlights the implosion of belief that has struck at the heart of Western society. Spiritual but not religious people are especially prevalent in the younger population in the United States, although a recent study has argued that it is not so much that people have stopped believing in God, but rather have drifted from formal institutions. It seems that just being a part of a religious institution is nowadays associated negatively with everything from the religious right to child abuse, back to the Crusades, and of course with terrorism today. Those in the spiritual but not religious camp are peddling the notion that by being independent, by choosing an individual relationship to some concept of higher power, energy, oneness, or something or other, they are in a deeper, more profound relationship than one that is coerced via a large institution like a church. That attitude fits with the message that we're receiving more and more, that feeling something somehow is more pure and perhaps more true than having to fit in with the doctrine, practices, rules, and observations of a formal institution that are handed down to us. Those that identify themselves in our multicultural, hyphenated American world often go for a smorgasbord pick and mix choices. A bit of yoga here, a Zen idea there, a quote from Taoism and a Kabbalah class, a bit of Sufism and maybe some feng shui, but not generally a reading and an appreciation of the Bhagavad Gita, the Karma Sutra, the Quran, let alone the Old or New Testament. But these people will not abandon their affiliation to the sense that there is something out there. So they do not go along with a rationalist and materialistic explanation of the world in which humans are responsible to themselves and one another for their actions and for the future. Being spiritual but not religious avoids having to think too hard about having to decide.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. 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 Oh yeah,
For churches across America, the last year has been an extraordinary time to reflect on what it means to be a church. The pandemic has forced all but the foolhardy to refrain from in-person worship services, potlucks, and any other community gatherings, the kinds of things that seemed to be the essence and life of the church community as far back as anyone can remember. It has been a challenging time, and though the distribution of vaccines has put America on what appears to be a good path to relaxing the restrictions on our lives, the situation in India and many other parts of the world should make us cautious about declaring victory too soon. We should allow ourselves hope, though, and make plans accordingly. In recent weeks, for example, here in our church in Idaho Falls, we have created a reopening task force to develop a plan for resuming in-person services when it is safe to do so, and you'll hear more about that very soon. But even as we address these unique challenges that pandemic presents, there are other considerations for the future, other challenges facing the church today that have been emerging for several decades. Studies show a consistent decline in church membership across almost every denomination, and the perceived importance and authority of the church in American society has been diminishing accordingly, for better or worse. To put it bluntly, the state of the traditional church is not very good, and it is hard to see much light at the end of the tunnel. Those of us who grew up in a time when most Americans felt compelled to belong to a church as a civic duty, or to at least claim some sort of a religious affiliation, may lament this undeniable declining role of the church and long for the past. Faced with the uncomfortable truth of our situation, we may feel the frustration that Frodo expressed in The Lord of the Rings when he says, "I wish it need not have happened in my time." But let us take to heart Gandalf's wise response to Frodo, "So do I, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." If we care about the church today, it does us no good to lament the good old days of civic religion and imagine that somehow we will find our way back to such times, that our churches will once again be filled with well-dressed nuclear families who feel obligated to show up every Sunday morning. We must be brave enough to face the reality of church in our time. But this doesn't mean we have to just accept the inevitable decline of the church to the point of extinction. Churches are important. Communities of faith provide a home for spiritual seekers to search for truth and meaning in our lives. And this is an impulse that is fundamental to being human. Churches are also a refuge for the world weary to find comfort, and in some cases, they become a true sanctuary for those in peril. We need not give up on church, but we must face the facts and decide what to do with the time that is given us. It is time to rethink the role and meaning of the church in today's world. And just to be clear, let me say that I'm using the word church very loosely to include both local congregations and the idea of the church universal. Beyond sectarian divisions about Protestants and Catholics, extending even to non-Christian organized religion and atheist and humanist assemblies. So where do we begin to rethink the role and meaning of the church? I think a good starting point is to consider what I believe are the three big purposes a church serves in society. These purposes align with needs that all of us have, and we will try to satisfy them in some way, even if we don't belong to a church. The first purpose is the priestly role, and this applies whether a congregation is served by a religious professional or not. In the priestly role, churches provide a home for rituals and rites of passage to commemorate the milestones of our lives, worship services, child dedications, coming-of-age ceremonies, marriages, memorial services, and celebrations of life. I would also include ongoing theological development within this priestly role. Through rituals and spiritual language and metaphor, We sacralize life. We overlay sacred meaning to existence. We are here to help people live meaningful lives and feel connected to the big cosmic story, the sacred mystery at the heart of existence. The second big purpose of church is pastoral. We are a community that comforts and supports one another in times of sorrow and celebrates together in times of joy, or at least we try to be. In our Unitarian Universalist faith, we affirm ideas like mutual respect, the inherent worth of every person, and the encouragement of one another in the search for truth and meaning. We take this pastoral role beyond the walls of our churches by caring about the vitality of our communities and the planet we share, making connections with other local churches and civic organizations. In our pastoral role, we are also a refuge for those who feel the burdens of this world, and especially for those who may suffer rejection or real harm at the hands of family or neighbors because of their identity or beliefs. As Unitarian Universalists, our ministry is not concerned with saving souls from some imagined damnation, but saving souls from the real hells of this world. As it says in the words of our opening hymn this morning, we strive to be a sanctuary where, though these sheltering walls be thin, may they be strong to keep hate out and hold love in. May it always be so. The third big purpose of this church is the prophetic role. The church is an essential moral voice in the world, defending what is just and good, protecting the powerless and disenfranchised, speaking truth to power, and showing up in acts of public witness. Though it is often exhausting work, it is important to see both the clergy and laity embodying this work of justice. Our faith compels us to show up in places like Standing Rock, Ferguson, Charlottesville, Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. In today's political climate, with some elected officials advancing agendas that are contrary to almost every principle of our faith, this may be the most important work we do. Unitarian Universalists are not alone in the fight, of course, and by joining together as congregations, denominations, and networks of faith communities to address the many issues we face, we can accomplish so much more. It is a fusion of spiritual energies that can bring hope and lasting change, even if we don't agree on every issue with our partner organizations. There are fundamental values of decency and fairness that every compassionate human being shares, and sometimes that is enough. Throughout American history, the brick and mortar, or more often beam and clapboard church, has been the hub for providing the priestly, pastoral, and prophetic roles in society. But society is changing, and the church must adapt and evolve to become relevant, to remain relevant. These roles are still important, and we need to consider how we can serve the needs of modern seekers who may not be drawn to becoming members of an established church community, or if they are, they may want more flexibility than we are used to. A few years ago, I ran across the book Choosing Our Religion by Elizabeth Drescher, who is a professor of religious studies at Santa Clara University. It is a very well-researched look at spiritual but not religious Americans, the so-called nuns, and that's N-O-N-E-S, talked about in our reading this morning. What her analysis reveals is that it is a far more complex situation among the religiously unaffiliated than just being a browser of the spiritual smorgasbord, as Alan Miller described. Most of the people in Drescher's surveys tried one or more forms of traditional religion, but left when they could no longer reconcile teachings and practices of the church with their own narrative sense of self. Either the doctrines were intellectually untenable for modern times, or they were put off by the blatant hypocrisy they witnessed in practice, or they were ostracized or even abused for questioning the assumptions of their faith. They still felt connected to God or something more vaguely spiritual, but being in a church did not feel spiritual at all. In fact, the majority of those surveyed felt the most spiritual in reference to what Drescher calls the 4 F's of contemporary American spirituality: family, Fido, friends, and food. It shouldn't be surprising that people in the survey valued the spiritual connections they felt spending time with family, friends, and their pets, or that preparing and sharing food with others ranked high on the list. Human beings are communal creatures and always have been. Whether we ritualize our shared meal and with religious purpose and call it communion, or if we simply enjoy a potluck or even just dinner with family around the table, the sharing of food is practically written in our DNA as a bonding practice. We sometimes joke about coffee hour being a UU sacrament, but in truth, it really is. As we rethink the idea of church, it would probably be good to increase the number of parish suppers and other opportunities for coming together and sharing food. Some churches have started coffee shop ministries and even craft beer ministries in pubs. A few years ago, I tried something like this by hosting a class on the parables at a local cafe in Dedham, Massachusetts, and it worked pretty well. We even had a couple of folks join the discussion who just happened to be at the cafe. I don't know if they ever came to the church after that, but they at least learned more about us. But as we get excited about these new possibilities, we also have to come to terms with a difficult reality. We need to largely give up on the idea that we can simply capture these spiritual but not religious folks and bring them into the fold of traditional church membership. We may attract some of them, but we need to look at what it means to be a member from a modern perspective. The barrier between who is inside and who is outside needs to be more porous and fluid than we may be used to. And this can be very uncomfortable for those of us who are tasked with running pledge campaigns and paying the bills. People today may be highly involved with the church during some periods of their life and then disappear for years at a time. Or they may be occasional visitors for many years. There's a kernel of truth in saying that UUs are just atheists with kids, or that Unitarian Universalism is the halfway point between Methodism and the golf course. When people have kids and they feel like they should provide some kind of religious education for their children, they often show up in our churches. Later, when the kids become snarky teenagers and go off to college, the parents may find churches less important and enjoy other aspects of life. Then after they pass middle age and start feeling a need for community more strongly, they come back to church and may become very involved. What is more, it may be that different churches or even different religious traditions seem to work better at these different stages of life. This is simply reality, and it's okay. It may pose new challenges for the continuity of church communities, but I'm not yet ready to predict the demise of the traditional church. Lots of people have been doing so for decades, but there still seems to be plenty of churches around, and some are even growing. What I am willing to say is that churches have to rethink their role in society and how they wish to fulfill it. There will likely be some painful decisions ahead for many churches to be successful. We may have to slaughter some of our sacred cows to evolve into the church of the future. But just think of our history. We have done this many times before. Think of how many ways the church has evolved from its Jewish origins through the Christianity of the Middle Ages and the Protestant Reformation. Think about the history of Unitarian churches in Transylvania and scattered across Europe during the bloody 16th and 17th centuries. Think of how our Unitarian and Universalist theology has transformed from liberal Christianity to become more diverse and inclusive. In every instance, there were painful periods of change, but the church survives. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I want to stimulate the conversation. What I will say is that I believe the way forward is at least twofold. First, keeping in mind the key roles that churches provide in communities, I think churches need to identify what they do well and do lots more of it. If you're really good at being a pastoral church, for example, maybe it is asking too much of you to also be the vanguard prophetic church in your community. I'm not saying that you don't do any prophetic work, but consider where your energies are best effective. Second, I think we need to evaluate every aspect of how we do church, from worship to membership to engagement in social justice, and see if it still appeals to the people we are serving now as well as those we wish to serve. How might we attract a more diverse community, for example? How can we better evangelize our positive faith that we have to offer the world? Is there a distinctive theological flavor in this church? And if so, is that good or bad? As we start to think about gathering together in person again, I challenge each of you to rethink the idea of church and what you think about this church in particular. This church has a rich history, and I believe we have many good years ahead of us. There will be adjustments, but I know we can adapt and evolve to survive and prosper in the years ahead. The spiritual needs of generations to come are waiting to be filled. I invite you now to join in our closing hymn, number 113, Where is Our Holy Church? Our closing words are from Annie Dillard. Why do people in church seem like cheerful, brainless tourists on a packaged tour of the absolute? Does anyone have the foggiest idea of what sort of power we blithely invoke? Or, as I suspect, does no one believe a word of it? The churches are children playing on the floor with their chemistry sets, mixing up a batch of TNT to kill a Sunday morning. It is madness to wear ladies' straw hats and velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should provide life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us to our pews. For the sleeping God may someday awake and take the fence, or the waking God may draw us where we can never return.
Please join me in the words that we take with us. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Don't forget to join us for the coffee hour beginning soon. Login information is in your order of service sent on Wednesday, and I believe it was also sent on Friday. But please enjoy our postlude.